seekers, joy givers, anyone looking for an infusion of joy, you have come to the right place. My name is Deb McGregor, and I am your host for our special summer series of Infusion of Joy. It is my pleasure to welcome to today's show, Laurel Otey. Laurel, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Deb. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, you and I actually started working on this. Oh my goodness, it's been several months that I think you and I met.
Absolutely. It's been a while now.
You have to come and talk about your business, which is Layered Living, and you are all about advocating for your health. So, Laurel, I think what would be really helpful for people is, because nobody just starts talking about advocating for your health. It doesn't just come out of the box, right? You usually have an experience that drives you to this. So let's talk to people about how you got started with even advocating for health.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all have a lot of stories and examples over our lives, but for me, the big ones that have really shaped who I've become and the type of work that I do have been through my experiences of having my own children. So I have 3 kids. My oldest was born when we were living in Australia, and the 2 younger ones were born back in the US. So I not only had very different, labor and birth and postpartum and early parenting experiences between, each of my 3 kids, but also different experiences in the different models of, preparing for birthing and recovering from babies in these 2 countries. These are both high income countries. You think a lot of overlaps and similarities, but man, it's just amazing. Some of the huge differences between their approach to, laboring and recovering and supporting new parents between the 2. So when I was pregnant with my first, I did most new parents, tried to get super prepared, took my classes and asked all the people all the advice and felt like I was, super on top of it and ready for all this. And so then I actually went into labor. And, a short 3 days of contractions later, she finally born with a whole bunch of we had a bunch of complications and challenges along the way over those 3 actual full days of laboring. It was ridiculous. And I just realized, looking back, and it took weeks afterwards to start realizing what had just happened, how unprepared I was for the reality of the experience of the possibilities that could pop up in the labor and birth, time. Certainly very unprepared for what postpartum recovery was actually like. And I realized that my own little classes and everything I took, they didn't even talk about really how to take care of a baby or anything. And I was like, how did none of that come up? It's not like that's a surprise I'm going to need to know about after the baby comes, right? How did I go into this with making such an effort and yet realize we are so uneducated on what we need to do, basic foundational level stuff, right? So, I did go through a lot of efforts to become better educated and solve a lot of these issues myself after our first. And, we had huge successes. And so you think by baby number 2, you're like, oh, I've got this. Now I know what to do. And then you have baby number 2. You're like, oh my gosh, I still had no idea of all these things. My depth of knowledge was still so light compared to what I really needed. And again, I'm like, but I had done some more learning. I had taken some classes and they still didn't cover what I needed. Where this information exists, why are parents not getting it? Why is it so hard to get the information we actually need in preparing for and going through the birth and recovery process, especially if you end up having a C-section? Like my third ended up being a very surprise C-section. She decided to do somersaults while I was in labor with her, and you can't deliver a sideways baby. So, such is life. But again, we never discussed it as a possibility at any of the multitude of doctor's appointments that I'd had. And I found myself yet again, baby number 3, wildly unprepared for these very, very common realities that parents often find themselves in. And it just blew my mind that I kept having these experiences and that even with more time and, different doctors and different medical models as well, it still wasn't resolving the underlying issue of like, I'm not getting the information that I really need. And I will say in Australia, I had way better postpartum support and care than I ever got in the US. And I was really thankful for that, especially with our first, because it gave me some awareness of what to look for baby number 2 and 3. But I still lacked a lot of that basic knowledge. So anyway, it's been about like 8 years of cumulative research, learning, educational, personal experiences, and client experiences that I've put together all of what, I feel like parents actually need into a usable form to make sure that they don't end up like we did and most other parents do, unprepared, overwhelmed, and real stressed out.
Well, and I love what you're speaking to here, because I remember same thing. All of a sudden you have this birth experience, which wasn't what you expected at all. In fact, I actually remember going and I had this labor plan and I had all this stuff spelled out. And I remember the doctor actually looked at me and he just he didn't laugh, but there was definitely like, okay. And I actually followed a lot of it. But then, as you mentioned, everything started, all havoc broke loose. I ended up in a section, same thing, after a long labor. So, of course, you're exhausted. And then it's like, oh, breastfeeding. And you think it's just going to be perfect. And everything just, okay, that's not exactly how it goes either. If you're one of those lucky ones, hey, great. But for the majority of us, there are things that happen. And if we are not prepared or know where to go for resources,
right,
we can feel so alone. And, I'm 54. I remember going through that first year feeling so alone and almost a little isolated, because I had these feelings or these things. And I was like, this is not normal, but nobody was talking about it. At least by the time I got to my son, my second, it was, okay, I know a little bit more what to ask. I know a little bit more what to be prepared about. And that was useful. At least there was a little bit. But man, you are so speaking what I think so many, not just women, but what about the dads out there who are watching their wife go through this, right? And they're like, what is happening to my wife?
Oh, absolutely. And that's such an important part. Traditional like childbirth classes, which I'm all for, like, you definitely need education. You got to get something. Still, the something I had was a whole lot better than nothing. I'm very glad I had something. But you look at most traditional childbirth education classes, and not only are they not covering enough information about like what the options are that you have, what your rights are, what certain possibilities that can pop up in the labor and delivery process, as well as postpartum and actually caring for your baby. But they're really not talking about dads and partners. Like, they're kind of left out, or they're a very light part of the education. And of course, what I do is both, a coach and, education is a critical part of coaching, is we want to make sure the whole family unit, and if there's other members of the family who are going to be actively involved, maybe it's grandma or, an aunt who's really close to the family, maybe live with them. Let's get them involved in these classes, these courses that I run, because we want to make sure everyone's working together as a team, right? If one person, and usually it ends up being mom. So just to, talk in generalities, if mom is doing everything in childcare and is not only in charge of all the childcare responsibilities, but also her own postpartum recovery as well, I mean, just think of the short and long-term health impacts that's going to have. Taking care of a baby is significantly more than full-time job. And then just taking care of yourself is also a more than full-time job. So you put these two more than full-time jobs together, and these unreasonable expectations that both us sometimes as mothers can put on ourselves, but if there's other family members and friends putting that on, you're going to be in a really complicated and unhealthy mindset, and potentially, physical, setting as well, because your body's going to be under massive stress. So yeah, talking about this part is a really big thing, and helping dads and partners identify explicitly what are the roles that I can play right this minute in labor. What are the roles I can play right this minute in newborn care, in my, my wife or my partner's postpartum recovery, and like really laying them out detail by detail. So no vagueness. There's no having to put the pieces together. Like there's no reason not to spell it out. They can come up with more ideas. Fantastic. Love that. But like, let's at least give that part as a great starting place.
Yeah, absolutely. Where were you when I had my kids? Because I just feel like this is so needed. And unfortunately, like what I'm celebrating is that we have this now. We have people like you now who can come in and help with that role. So is this something that you get trained for? Is this some, like, what does that look like? And how do people find you? Like, how do even people connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a number of childbirth education courses out there. The issue that most of them I have found in my research is, one, they're still not covering nearly enough of the information that I'm like, parents actually have to have. And if you get certified with one of these particular courses, you are required to teach their content only as a representative, which I understand why, like that makes sense. So I ended up choosing not to go through one of those training programs because I'm like, I still won't be able to provide the type of support that people actually need. Man, if I had had me when I was having my babies, not only would it have saved me so much, stress and overwhelm, sleep, and honestly, thousands upon thousands of dollars with conditions that are very common but got missed for ages and escalated into bigger problems and affected the whole family and resulted in other health issues. Like, it would have been really great to have had me, not to like, toot my own horn, but man, I just think like, God, I really needed this information so badly. And I really needed the support and the understanding. And that's what I always strive to give everyone else. I just look at every other family of like, this could have been me getting this. Let me give them what I really, really desperately needed and our family needed in order to be a healthier, happier, less overwhelmed, and better rested family, right? So you can find me online. Here'sLivingLife.com is the website, but I've got my Facebook group. I'm on Instagram. Got a lot of really cool ways to connect with people. Virtually all of my services are done over an online platform. So I do work with people all over the country. I have had a couple in Australia. I don't do a ton of those just because of the time zone issues can be a bit problematic, but really anywhere in the US, I regularly work with families and we have so much fun together. So it's great.
I love this. Talk to me about what it really means to advocate for your health. Like when we say that, we're not talking about going and yelling at the doctor. Like that's not it. Talk to me about what that line means. What does it mean to advocate for your health?
Absolutely. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. And there's definitely an element of that when it comes to advocating for our health. Yes, there are times you really have to be loud and vocal if you're like feeling like it's a serious life and death situation, and that's the last resort. But we want that to be a last resort. We should have so much long before we ever are in that sort of situation that we can do to help advocate for ourselves. So certainly, let's say if you're pregnant, if you're in that phase, advocating for your health would initially be initiating those conversations and those questions with your doctors in your appointments, not waiting for them to raise a topic or waiting for them to choose to inform you on a topic, because unfortunately, it's probably not going to happen. They're going to do their basic checks. Okay, going to check the heart rate, get an idea of fetal movement, basic ballpark baby size. If you're checking all the boxes, it's going to be moving on. Got any questions? No? Okay, great. See you next time. So unless you're out there going, okay, what do I need to know about X? Or I really want to talk to you about this possibility in birth, or I really want to know what my options are. Like, you really have to actively initiate those conversations. Same thing, if your spouse, your partner is able to come to you to those appointments, I strongly encourage it. They're a great person to ask those questions as well and to take some notes, because you are not going to remember everything. It does not matter how interested you are. It's just not possible. Our brains are tired and trying to keep track of all these other things. So having 2 people on an appointment really is a good idea. And this is actually where birth plans come in. You mentioned your birth plan and feeling like, it was a bit of a joke and kind of went out the window. And that is most people's experiences with their birth plan, as they feel like, oh, why did I even bother, right? Well, one of the things I teach people is how to put together what I call a fail-proof birth plan. And what that means is we really have discussed and looked at what the options are. We have a plan. We have the backup plan. We have the backup plan. We understand what the scenarios are so that, one, we are educated on what the options are and what our rights are. But 2, we're going into it somewhat mentally prepared for, okay, like, we recognize my perfect ideal dream may or may not happen. If it does, love that for you. Super pumped that that's your experience. But if something happens and that's not it, we still want you to be able to walk away with not only a positive, experience of what birth was like, but also a safe and healthy experience to minimize you and babies' short and long-term health risks from the whole labor and birth process. So birth plans are a great opportunity to become educated and to practice advocating for your health and initiating those conversations. If nothing else, that's one of the biggest benefits right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you brought up safe, because the work you're doing, there's so many levels of care involved, and at all levels, it is keeping everyone safe in this process. And that is not just a physical safe, it's an emotional safe, it's a spiritual safe, like it's all of the above, right? It's not just one thing that's involved.
No, you're exactly right.
I think that's really, really important for people. I know you've worked with people. Do you have, obviously holding confidentiality, but I don't know if we want to call it success story, an interactive story, but just something to really demonstrate, like, this really works. This is someone with whom I worked, and this is how their experience was better because they worked with you.
Yeah. Well, I've got 2 stories just sort of sticking on the pre-birth and post-birth sort of side of things. So I had a family come to me. This was their 2nd child that they were pregnant with. And the first time around, she'd had a C-section. She was like, I had such a terrible birth experience, not really because it was a C-section, but just because I felt so out of control. I had no idea what was happening to me. I didn't know how to ask what I needed to ask. I didn't feel like people were listening to me. Having my daughter, like, when she came home was really stressful because I didn't know what to do. And I just really don't want to feel like that again. It was just such a terrible way to become a parent. So she signed up for my prenatal course, my coaching program, which, like I said, is a combination of educational classes and coaching. We worked on putting together that fail-proof birth plan, getting both her and her partner, the foundation of knowledge that they needed, and him in the mindset as well of, like, how do I serve as a real support partner in labor and birth and after baby's born and newborn care and things like that. And for her, she needed to have a second C-section because of her particular medical circumstances. But she, after having the baby, was like that. It was like a night and day experience, because I not only had an understanding of, what was happening and why, I was able to ask for specific things in my C-section, that I had no idea I even had the option to ask for. Like, I didn't know I had choices that I could have easily just asked for the first time around. And it would have made such a difference to my experience of not just birth, but also my experience of becoming a parent, my ability to bond. She'd really struggled with bonding for a long time after her first. And she's like, it was so different this time because I knew how to ask for and what my choices were. And we were able to have those conversations earlier and ahead of time and work really as a team. And I knew that my partner had this knowledge as well and was going to be right there asking for this. If for whatever reason I couldn't, or I forgot something, I knew he was on top of it. And it was just such a sense of relief to know that this support was there, and to really, live the difference of what that is like, having that support. Yeah. So that was a really exciting one for me.
I just want to come in for a second, because what I feel in this is that there was an empowerment. And
100%.
so in that advocating for health, even though, I mean, obviously we've got this, that's a whole nother conversation we could have about the C-section experience, right? And what we can potentially make up about that. But I love that even though that piece was the same, what was different was there was an empowerment in it. She was able to advocate through working with you and finding that voice that was so important in this process. Mm-hmm. And I believe it makes all the difference. And for the healing even after, right? Like just that empowerment. I love that. Okay, sorry. I know you got another one too, but we had to hit on that, right?
Yeah, no. Well, and it's not just the impact to the mom who's had the baby. Obviously, that's hugely important, but this benefited the whole family, her ability to bond, her ability for her older child to feel that, the family was growing together and it wasn't just, stress and overwhelm and chaos, and, her partner to be actively involved and feel like he had some confidence, because it certainly can be a very intimidating and overwhelming process, for dads as well and partners, because they're not the one birthing the baby. So sometimes they feel like this helpless observer. So for him to have specific tools and strategies of things he knew that he could do and to be able to act on those was hugely empowering for him. And again, another source of relief and support for the mother as well. So I can't stress enough how important these things are. Now, after baby arrives, we have all these little things that we weren't expecting. It's a new tiny human, which they have limited ways, or at least not the same ways of communicating that we have. So there's a big learning curve there. They're completely reliant on us, but they're also their own little personality that we've never met or interacted before, right? We've got this little stranger. We have no idea really who you are, and we're trying to get to know you while at the same time respond to all the little demands that are constant and can be very stressful in and of themselves. Even when they're normal and healthy, it still can be overwhelming. So, I could spend a million years telling you a gazillion stories, but I had one mom who, her baby was super, super fussy, crying, upset, every single afternoon, classic witching out, as they're called. And she was like, I know my doctor says it's just normal and do my best to comfort her, but she seems really unhappy and really is there anything I can do? So we just had, some quick little reviews of what was going on, what was a, typical day. She was still young enough. It's not like she was on a super, tight schedule or something like that, but roughly, what is your day looking like? What is your approach? And we were finding just little things like the technique of, how long she was burping her baby, was making a difference in how much air her baby was accumulating across the day, and therefore how fussy her baby was. And, even just talking about little details like that, through these, coaching consultations and stuff can make a huge difference. And for her, she's it was again, a whole new baby. She was happy now. It was such a small thing. She's I had no idea. Nobody ever told me that. I knew I need to burp my baby, but I don't know how long. I didn't really know how to tell if it was enough. So even tiny details and stuff like that, we can make a big difference in. And, like I said, there's a gazillion of these sorts of little stories, some big things, some small things, but I just want to stress the importance of even something that seems minute and trivial can have a dramatic impact on your experience in parenting and your relationship with that baby and what your daily life is like, right? So it's so important to have that resource and that information to help you with these, quote unquote, little issues that really make a big impact on your life.
Well, it's, completely different story, but similar is if you have an issue with your ankle, it affects your knee, which affects your hip, which affects your ability to walk. It's conceptually, it's that same thing. Sometimes that one little thing that has that effect of just rippling down can change everything. And that's what I love about the work you're doing, is that you're actually helping identify that and coming up with solutions together, working coactively with the mom or family unit, because there might be other people involved.
Right.
So let's review again these type of programs you're doing. Are some of these group and some of them one-on-one?
So yes, all of my programs I offer as a group, platform in order to have that community. So, but I am always happy to, do some one-off, like one-on-one coaching, especially when we're dealing with a specific problem that they may or may not want to just share with the whole group. Although I think there is value personally in sharing with the group and letting other people hear. But sometimes people are just not in that space or they're not feeling it, and I completely understand and appreciate that. So I'm pretty flexible in that regard. The classes portion of it, I, as much as possible, try to always keep those as a group setting, because there is value in having, hearing questions from other people. And, that's more like a, transfer of information in that way. The coaching is great when we can do group as well, again, for that sharing of information, but we do a mix of, private coaching sessions as well, so that I can get into the details of that specific family, especially, again, if it's like a problem solving sort of thing. If it's generalized issues, we try and do that coaching. When it gets into specific problems, that tends to be more private. And then certainly the consultations around developing a fail-proof birth plan. The initial one, typically I try to run that as a group, to talk about the big ideas. And then when we get into like the refining, I'll do like a one-off here and there to, answer some specific questions on their particular, circumstances that may have like some of their personal medical information that doesn't necessarily not appropriate to share with the group. So, right. It just depends on that sort of thing. But the great thing is I'm very flexible.
Yeah, I love this. And what I also love about what you're bringing up is people can really find their place where they need to be with it. And do you run those, like, is there one that starts at the top of every month, or is it a seasonal? Like, how does that work? Like, when could somebody get started if they were looking to be involved in a group?
Yeah, that's a good question. So certainly the classes portion of it is pretty much running all of the time. So that part you can sign up for any time. The coaching programs, there are certain times of the year that I'm not taking on new coaching clients, just because of realities of my own life of having 3 kids. Like, I'm not taking any on any coaching clients like the week before Christmas. There's no way any one of us is going to be attending anything, right? And right as summer starts, when the kids are all coming home from school, like, I got to take a break just to do my own family stuff. Like, it's one of the benefits of owning your business is you can set your hours and things like that.
That's
but for the majority of the year, the whole end of winter, springtime is actively enrolling people. The going back to school, so like fall through beginning of winter time, actively enrolling. So it's kind of like those two little, like, peak winter and like midsummer is where I take breaks in the enrolling. Well, I'll enroll coaching people, but it will be starting later in the year.
Absolutely. Well, you're advocating for your own health.
Very
like
much.
This is the whole thing, is that we all have to advocate for our health. It just is. No one is going to advocate for it for you. Like, this is I hope one of the things that people are really getting from this is, really, no matter what age you're at, it's important to advocate for your own health. It just is. And you're setting that example for the people with whom you're working, right? So I think that's
absolutely.
So when people go to the website, layeredlivinglife.com, they can get all these details. It's got all the program. And you have a lot of frequently asked question kind of things too. I mean, people can get a lot of information just by going to your site.
Absolutely. And, a great way to get some more information is to sign up for, if you're pregnant, to sign up for a free birth plan audit, where we talk about you could have one sentence down, you could have 3 pages of notes, whatever. Like, we'll just talk about, where are you? What are the types of things you need to be thinking about? And it's a great opportunity for you to start getting a better idea of, like, who I am, what I do, what sort of work we have. If you have already had the baby, or you're not yet pregnant, and you just want some general information, a free consultation, again, is a great place to initiate that conversation to get your specific details answered. But you're right, there's so much information on the website. I do list out basically like a course syllabus of my prenatal course classes, so that you get a better sense of, the breadth of information that is covered in those, and how much more extensive it is than certainly your traditional, hospital birth classes, which I'm like, go to those ones too. It doesn't hurt to get more information, but they are not going to cover nearly enough. That's just the reality.
Yeah. No, I love this. And I'm hoping that there are people watching going, oh my gosh, hello. And I'm even thinking of grandparents out there who might have somebody that is, ready or expecting or whatever. I mean, I'm thinking of parents who have kids who are now moving up into this realm. What a great gift for someone to give them to say, hey, here's a great way for you to approach this next season of your life. And there are people out there, there are resources out there, and they can help facilitate this path. And so you can advocate for your own health, because I think we're going to see more and more of this. I think people are more and more wanting to advocate for their health, advocate for their lives. I mean, this is a thing right now, right? Like it's a thing right now. Any final thoughts you want to share with the audience today?
I think the big thing I just want to share, having certainly my own experiences of having struggled with common issues that pop up in labor, pop up postpartum recovery, pop up with newborns, and the impacts, like the huge impacts those had on my health and my family's health and our happiness. It really is possible to make parenting easier and more fun. And that takes through better health. It takes through learning how to advocate for our health and our kids' health. It takes getting that foundation of knowledge and putting that support community in place. And that's really what I'm here to do, both for the expectant and the new parents. I've got programs for both. You mentioned grandparents. Those post-birth parenting classes are actually great ones for grandparents as well, if those grandparents were actively involved in the care of their grandchildren, their babies, because it's probably been a while since they had kids themselves. Might be a good idea to get some refreshers on how to actually take care of the baby, and what are those common issues that pop up, and who are the right medical resources to go to address them, so that you're not also wondering, like, what do I do? Like, I know I had kids, but I don't really remember. We didn't have this option. So.
Yeah, and how about how to use all these new gizmos that are out there? I mean, there's stuff out there I see now. I'm like, what is this thing? I've never seen this thing before. It's crazy. So
complicated, right?
Oh my gosh. Well, Laurel, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. I've learned a lot. Yeah. And it's actually kind of inspired me in unique ways. It's inspired me in unique ways. And it's always great to remember the birthing times, even though there's things that I might do differently. It still brings back the beautiful memories of bringing life into this world. And what a miracle. I mean, there's a miracle of life, right? So it's just a great, refreshing thing to be thinking about it again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate it. And I'm so honored to be able to be part of this Infusion of Joy summer series. This has been such a treat for me. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And of course, we wish you the best in the work that you're doing. Thanks for doing this work in the world and increasing people's joy factor, because that's ultimately, right?
That's a good absolutely it. We want more joy.
Right. It's all about joy, for sure. Yep. So and audience, we thank you for choosing to tune in today for your Infusion of Joy summer series. Again, thanking Laurel Otey for joining us today. Please remember, you can check her out at layeredlivinglife.com. Check out her website. Tons of stuff there for you to check out. And again, thanks so much for joining us, reminding you to live, share, and lead with joy. Have a great day, friends. Bye.